Welcome to Rethinking Trade with Lori Wallach. I'm Lori Wallach. Today we're going to do a spot news short episode of the podcast to get folks up to speed on China's new export controls on critical minerals, or sometimes you hear on magnets made with rare earths. It's a big honking deal, like huge. They could shut down the whole global economy with this move if it's real. But a lot of folks aren't really clear what the hell it's about. So we're going to have an expert to interview shortly and look for that episode coming. But first, to get everyone on the same page, what the heck is this about? So first of all, what is a critical mineral? It is a bunch of minerals that are used in manufacturing. You've heard a bunch of them: cobalt, lithium, bunch of others, manganese. Separate, there's a subset of those that are called rare earths, or you might have heard them called heavy metals. They are used for magnets that are in communications, defense, automobile manufacturing, almost every electronic device, and have a bunch of other really important applications that are very hard to replace. So the good news is these rare earths are actually not so rare in the sense that they are distributed all over the world. The problem is that China has invested for decades in developing the mines. So the mineral can be there. You have to get it out of the ground, and the processing and the technologies, not just to process, but then to make these magnets. So number one, broadly, the category of critical minerals, China has really focused on that and has near monopoly in a lot of those. Rare earths, China really has control because the biggest issue there is not finding the stuff, it's processing it. And it takes a lot of toxic chemicals, but also some of the processes to actually refine it are, not well known. The technologies were developed in China, and China's kept control of that. So what happened? So China announced, kind of out of the blue last week, that it was going to start export controls, both on the minerals themselves and the magnets, but also on the technologies. And what that means is basically they will decide who and if countries, companies, for what applications, where they go of these essential goods that the whole dang world's pretty much reliant on China providing for production of all kinds of, different things all around the world. And the thing about it is that since 2010, there's been like a lot of awareness of this problem. In 2010, in a sort of geopolitical fight, China cut off Japan's access to certain critical minerals and rare earth magnets. And a lot of commentators basically, hit the alarm and said, oh, good Lord, look at that. Well, everyone is super over-reliant. That's a warning. Now, yes, 2010, 15 years ago. What's even scarier is, for those of us who are ancient, we remember before that a Department of Defense report at about 2000-ish or 2002 that talked about the problem of over-reliance in the military supply chain, missile guidance, etc., on these critical minerals and on Chinese rare earth magnet production. So it's not like it's a new issue. Unfortunately, we've seen Democratic and Republican presidents alike not make it the big emergency Manhattan Project style, holy beans, how are we going to have other supply chains for this stuff? By the way, we have a bunch of these minerals, but we don't have the processing technology. Allies have lots of these minerals, Chile, Australia. But again, no one has the processing capacity or necessarily the know-how, and certainly not at the scale that the demand for using them is. And so in all that time, there was nothing like oh my goodness, we better figure out either here or here and with our allies, which by the way would be the smarter thing, redundant supply chains. We don't want it all made here. Some should be made here, but we should diversify imports to a bunch of countries. Even if it was a country, any country that had near monopoly control, that would not be smart, because separate from whatever the Chinese government is up to right now with announcing a voluntary, we're going to have an export control, you could just have like an earthquake or a natural disaster or another epidemic that could cut off a sole source. So we need this for resilience and redundancy, separate from whatever the geopolitics are. And we've known that for 15 plus years. So where are we now? What's the story? The problem is if China actually follows through and actually starts controlling where all this stuff goes and licensing it very strictly, China would have the ability to make sure, for instance, that no other parts of the world, no other countries, no non-Chinese companies could start to compete in EV vehicles or many elements of different countries' military defense are reliant on the magnets for their guidance systems, etc. But all kinds of production, our cell phones, our iPhones, etc., are reliant on the stuff coming out of China. So the thing is, we don't know exactly what this is about. It is the case that there is a very high level summit. So summit, highest leaders in both countries with China and the US. Trump is supposed to meet with Premier Xi. We don't know if that's meeting's still going to happen, but that meeting is set for a couple of weeks down the road. And it could be, some people think, maybe hopefully, that this is the Chinese strategy to try and create leverage in anticipation of that meeting where they're supposed to talk about tariffs generally, etc. So is this sort of China showing like, all right, US, you may have a $1 trillion trade deficit and we may have a $1 trillion trade surplus. Therefore, we're reliant on selling you our stuff. But like, we've got leverage over you too. We can shut down the whole global economy, the modern economy over this. Maybe it's a tactic. Maybe it's a strategy of a flex. On the other hand, it might be more real. And if it's more real, it's China basically exercising monopoly control over things the whole economy wants to leverage its power geopolitically, to make sure other new competitors aren't coming up in areas where countries around the world are starting to think about, maybe we should be manufacturing more stuff. The post-COVID experience of not being able to make or get stuff in a lot of countries has made a lot more countries aware of just the need for redundancy and their over-reliance on any individual country's production being problematic. So that all said, the question is what happens next? And kind of the answer is we don't totally know, because we don't know if this is a strategy and like a tactic, or if this is something that is really about to be implemented worldwide. Other parts of the world are taking it pretty seriously, though, which is, a signal that even if in this moment, this isn't that move of cutting off access, that is, a gun that is loaded and could go off. So, for instance, the European Union made a call for the entire G7 bloc to coordinate together for speedy development of alternative supply chains, which is to say, it's not just the US that could get cut off on this, it's the whole world. Everyone's production relies on it. And so, it's being taken pretty damn seriously in Europe. The Trump administration has been all over the place on this. So, when it originally happened, President Trump said, that's it, 100% tariffs on you guys by November 1st, China, and knock it the hell off. And the stock market started to go down. And sadly, as is the case, the president backed down, which seems to happen every time he threatens something economically. And if there's a stock market reaction, he doesn't sort of wait for 2 or 3 days to see if it's a hiccup or it's, an actual problem. He backs down. So the president has said things basically out of both sides of his mouth about every day. And even today, he said something like, well, 100% tariffs wouldn't be sustainable. And then like 3 sentences later said, but we may still have 100% tariffs. So it's very hard to understand what the deal is. And it could be that now we have both sides positioning, flexing in anticipation of this meeting. Trump originally said he was canceling the meeting. Now apparently it's back on. And the trade representative has confirmed it's back on. But I guess we'll have to wait and see how this episode plays out. I highly recommend following on Twitter or Blue Sky Rush Doshi at Rush Doshi, Doshi, at the Council on Foreign Relations, who's been tracking this forever. He's the former Biden administration's national security director, the guy who's director for China and Taiwan. So if you want to see sort of live action, his Twitter is a good place. we're going to invite an expert on to grill them about what should be done to fix this, how we've gotten into this pickle. But now hopefully everyone is in a better place to sort of understand what the hell we're talking about. And as you're reading this, where the press is often interchanging critical minerals, magnets, heavy metals, all these words, rare earths, you now know sort of the hierarchy of what's what. Here's the bottom line. It was bad judgment on a bipartisan basis over decades to have ourselves, but also for the whole world, to become so overly reliant on a monopoly source. And we've learned over and over the perils of monopoly. After COVID, we should never be making that mistake again. And despite trying to make some supply chain improvements and diversifications, why this wasn't sort of a ground zero, throw a lot of effort, money, and strategy into it can be unpacked later. But I think what we're going to hear from our next episode when we have an expert is we sure as heck need to do that now. So stay tuned. This is episode 1, and you will have episode 2 soon in the revitalized Rethinking Trade with Lori Wallach, signing off.